What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? The biggest questions of all. The questions that have dogged the greatest minds for centuries. It makes me look up to the heavens in awe at our vast, magnificent universe and wonder at the possibilities of what life is all about. Join me on a journey to understand more about who we are, why we're here, and to discover more happiness, meaning, and purpose.
Preview.
Hello, and welcome to part 5 of the film. Now, in the last part, I shared with you this idea of the one blue consciousness. That is your core. You're in fact blissful and happy for no reason at your deepest level. Now, you might say to me, you know, Ashok, that's nice and flowery, but that's not my experience in life. I've got issues that I'm dealing with in life. Now, why is it that we don't experience that deepest part of us, that unconditioned part of us? In this section, I will explain why that is and what is the cause of the distress in life. What stops us from experiencing who we truly are at our deepest level? Some of us may never have even glimpsed our deepest nature. The original blue consciousness is from the spiritual realm. It is the deepest part of you. For it to experience and express in the physical universe, it needs special equipment. The universe and life evolved in the way that it did to create this equipment. For human beings, specifically, this equipment is the body, the mind, and the intellect. Now, the one blue consciousness splits itself up into individual souls. Normally, we might imagine that the soul is housed in the body. But in fact, consider the opposite, that the body and the mind are actually enclosed in the soul or housed inside the soul. And it is the soul, the consciousness, that illuminates and gives life to the mind and body. The mind is just equipment. Take the example of electricity. Now, there's a lot of equipment that requires electricity. A TV, a microwave, a fan. They are all equipment, but what powers them is electricity. Yet it's the same electricity running through all of them. In the same way, there is one consciousness powering all the individual's equipment, the body, mind, and intellect. As we said at the beginning of the film, consciousness is very special. Let's look at all the layers of our existence. It's important to understand these layers to know more about who we are at each layer. Firstly, there's our consciousness, which is like the sunlight, like the electricity that powers everything. Then there is the body, which we will represent as the glass of the bowl. The glass, by trapping the sunlight inside the bowl, the space inside the glass creates the ego, the individual consciousness. The ego, the separate individual consciousness, is then given a mind and an intellect. Each layer becomes more and more subtle as we go deeper. The body is known as the gross layer, not because it's horrible, but because it's the heaviest, densest type of matter. Then we have the mind and the intellect. They are much more subtle, and so they are called the subtle body or subtle experience. The consciousness is given a body and 5 senses in order to experience the physical realm. The information from the 5 senses, touch, taste, smell, sight and hearing, is passed on to the mind, where that information is then processed. Now, what is the mind? Have you ever asked yourself what the mind actually is? Consider your mind as a flow of thoughts and emotions. If you stop thinking, then the mind temporarily doesn't exist. This flow of thoughts and emotions we will represent as water in the bowl. The water now dominates the bowl, rather than the light. The sunlight, the consciousness, gets distorted and forgets who it really is. Now that individual consciousness, that ego, thinks it is the mind. It forgets that it's actually the pure sunlight, and it thinks it's the water instead. The rays of light in the bowl are now distorted. If I put this pencil inside the bowl, it looks bent. But is the pencil really bent? Of course not. The water distorts the light and gives the illusion of bending. But in fact, both the pencil and the sunlight are unchanged. The mind creates emotions. Now, what are emotions? Think about the emotion of anxiety and where you feel it in your body. You feel a physical sensation in the stomach or in the chest region. And you probably also have anxious thoughts in the mind. So an emotion combines 2 aspects: the physical sensations and the emotionally charged thoughts. Now, how are emotions actually created? Well, we have our outer world and our inner world. For simplicity, let's assume that the majority of things that we face in life are people and situations in the outer world. The mind takes in this information from the senses, interprets that information, and creates emotional reactions. Those emotions then form our actions and words. How does the mind choose how to react or which emotions to create? Well, the mind has particular perspectives on people and situations, as represented by these coloured glasses. And so every emotional reaction is based on what perspectives we took in the past. We don't see things the way they are, we interpret them based on our own past experiences. It's like wearing coloured glasses to interpret the world around you. You distort the world. You see the world according to how the past experiences have affected you. So it's like wearing these glasses. You can see the world as a negative and depressing place, or you can change your glasses and see it as a wonderful opportunity for self-expression. You decide. How do you see the world? Now, let me give you an example of a previous client of mine. He would suffer extreme anxiety every time he was given constructive feedback at work. And believe it or not, sometimes he would just quit the next day. Now, when we delve deeper into this, we found that as a child, he felt he suffered a lot of unfair criticism from people around him, and so was hypersensitive to any feedback. And so his past was still affecting his emotional reactions in the present moment. His emotions are based on past perspectives. The reason I'm telling you about emotions is because when we have difficult emotions, it can make it harder to be the observer of your thoughts, the observer of your mind. It's easier to get carried away with your emotions. Now, emotions aren't bad or good. It's just whether our emotions own us and control us. And whether our overreactions to our environment make us feel, say, anxious or fearful or angry, when in fact there is no danger. If emotions go uncontrolled, they can become toxic, contributing to illness. Now, the mind is the more uncontrolled part of us, and we can sometimes call it the monkey mind, because it never stops thinking, wanting, worrying, rushing. Let's try this experiment right now. Please close your eyes, and for 10 seconds, I want you to try not to have any thoughts or emotions. Now open your eyes. Now, how did that go? It was hard, right? Because the mind is incessant, it blocks out those glimpses of bliss, those glimpses of love that you truly are. Now, the mind is obsessed with loss and gain. It is obsessed with likes and dislikes, things it wants to push away and things it wants to have more of. And it flits into the past and the future, just like a rocking horse. The mind goes backwards and forwards, but never actually gets anywhere. It creates emotions about the past and the future, mainly anger and guilt and sadness about the past, and fear, greed, and expectations about the future. This is a major source of stress in our lives. Your true blue nature can only be experienced in the present moment, when the water in the bowl is still. Only then can the sunlight penetrate through the mind. But the mind is restless. It finds it hard to just be in the moment. Instead, there is unhappiness due to regrets about the past and anticipation for some happiness in the future. Now, emotions have a positive reason for being with us. Emotions have a message for us. They tell us about our perspectives on life, about our deeply held beliefs that may or may not be taking us where we want to go. Every difficult or chronic emotion is an opportunity to reflect deeply on our deeply held beliefs. However, sometimes these emotions can really become chronic, and then they overtake us. Now, what about the nobler emotions, such as love, compassion, forgiveness, generosity? Now, for ease of understanding, I'm going to refer to these as feelings rather than emotions, because emotions come from the mind, whereas feelings come from the heart. So you have another layer of your existence that we're going to refer to as your heart. And it is from this center, this layer, that you can access your soul. And it is also from this place that you can experience, through your heart, your deepest nature. We are going to treat the intellect as different to the mind. Now, of course, we only have one mind that includes the intellect. But it is useful here to separate their functions. The intellect is the rational thinking mind, often associated with the prefrontal cortex area of the brain. So what's the difference between the mind and the intellect? The mind is the incessant flow of thoughts and emotions based on past reactions, so how you reacted in the past. The mind is very reactive. The intellect reflects on all of this and decides what to think, how to act, what to say. It's like a filter for all the noise that's going through the mind, a higher state of awareness, if you like. The intellect can reflect on what the right thing to do is, what the rational thing to do is. But even the intellect can become overwhelmed by the emotions, can be persuaded to do something different by the emotions. Or the intellect can rise above the emotions and decide to do something different. Imagine the mind is like being inside a house. The mind can only see what is immediately around it. But the intellect is like being in a helicopter and rising above the situation. We can see things from a higher perspective, sometimes called the helicopter view. Instead of reacting, we can take more things into account. And the more mature our intellect, the more it can see. The emotional mind and the intellect are constantly interacting and constantly affecting each other. For example, let's say we have an interview for a job that we really want. The emotional mind will throw up all kinds of fearful thoughts and emotions based on its biased perspective on the situation. Oh no, you're going to do badly in this interview. What happens if you can't answer the questions? The intellect has the opportunity to rationally say, it's okay, I know my stuff, I will be fine. I'll go into the interview and do a great job. The mind is like an unbridled horse, running free and emotionally reacting to the world around us. The intellect is like the horse rider. She has some level of control over the mind's wanderings. But sometimes your emotions can often dominate, and you can't think clearly. It's almost like there's a constant battle going on, and if we lack awareness, our reactive mind can dominate. You may believe your emotions and get carried away with them. Sometimes the emotions are appropriate, but more often than not, they are overreactions to our environment. This can cause mental suffering and uses up a lot of our energy, especially those deep negative emotions. What makes us happier is when the mind and the intellect are integrated. That is, that they agree, that the emotional mind is not overwhelming the intellect with all these emotions that are inappropriate. If that's the case, then there's inner conflict. So when the mind and body agree, then the mind already responds appropriately to the environment, and the intellect is there for support. Now, what makes a great leader? Think of someone that you think is a good leader. I believe that someone is a good leader who has effective leadership over his own mind. Rather than being swayed by the emotions of the mind and what's in it for me, we respect leaders who have a clear, strong intellect and live from their higher purpose. They're centered. Furthermore, they have developed their heart layer. They have a clear, strong intellect, but also heart, a genuine care for people around them. The intellect is also where our values are based. Our moral values and ethical conduct, they're all decided in our intellect. For instance, the mind may really enjoy the feeling of getting money, but it is our intellect which will reflect upon its values, reflect upon its ethics, and decide upon an appropriate way to gain money. The ego occurs when the consciousness inside the bowl has a separate identity and identifies with something else. These are labels that we attach to ourselves to make us feel significant, that give us self-worth. Now the consciousness can identify with the body and sensory pleasures, or the mind and your thoughts, or your job, your status, your wealth, your possessions, your power, or your fame. Or a point of view. I am right, you are wrong. Now the ego occurs if there is any type of thought or emotion which represents I-ness or minus, what's in it for me. It is the ego that makes us feel separate to other people. We compare ourselves to others and feel inferior or superior to others. The irony is that that part of you, that ego, is ultimately trying to heal the hurt of separation. It feels lonely, it feels vulnerable. But in trying to do that by making itself feel good, it separates us even more and causes even more unhappiness. Let's look at some examples. Let's say we were to walk into a party and suddenly feel alone or shy. That is our ego. The part of us that does not feel a sense of belongingness to everyone and everything around us. We feel alone and separate. That is our ego. If we are having a conversation with someone and we want to show off about something, or we want to be right in an argument, that is our ego wanting to make us feel good about ourselves. We have forgotten who we really are. We are using people and situations to justify our separate identity. We want to feel significant. The heart is where you experience and express your highest feelings of love, compassion, forgiveness, care. It's the most direct expression of your true blue nature. These are the more direct expressions of your soul, the blue consciousness. You can be a candle in the darkness when you come more from your heart. This is the light of consciousness that you bring into the world. Now, many people come only from the head. They think that they are the mind and the emotions. But discovering glimpses of your true blue nature is a journey of 1.5 feet from the head to the heart. With an open heart and a calmer mind, something amazing then happens. Your higher purpose becomes revealed through you. Now, what is your higher purpose? Each of us brings a unique gift to the world. Wouldn't it be incredible to know that higher purpose and live life from that place? That's what this experiment is all about. To discover the light within you and let it shine. Let's summarize what we have learnt in this part of the film. The soul, which is an individual bit of the one consciousness, is from the spiritual realm. It needs special equipment to experience the physical realm, so it receives the body, the mind, and the intellect, as well as the heart. The soul forgets that it is born from fullness. It temporarily forgets its true blue nature and identifies with the body and the mind and the intellect. It forgets its fullness, forgetfulness. This is so it can make the journey back to blue in the physical realm. The mind is a constant flow of thoughts and emotions. It keeps hopping between the past and the future. The intellect is the rational, decisive part of the mind that filters the constant stream of thoughts and decides the right thing to do or say. Often the mind sways us in one direction. It wants us maybe to do the easier thing, or the more comfortable thing, the thing that might give the mind pleasure. But the intellect chooses to do something else, what is right. This disintegration, this battle, is the source of a lot of our confusion and problems in life. In the next video, we shall look at our conditionings or habits. And these conditionings determine the kinds of thoughts and emotions that we regularly experience.